G'day guys, welcome back to the channel, and of course we are here today to review round 4 being Gather Round. Now I'm recording the start of this on a Saturday, and you can see I'm in my Swans gear. I'm about to get ready to go for the Swans game pretty early in the morning, so pretty excited about that. But we've already had a couple of games go through, and of course we'll start right back on Thursday night and Gather Round with Adelaide versus Melbourne. And in the end, despite Adelaide kicking the last 5 goals of the game, Melbourne were pretty in control for the majority of it and ran out winners by 15 points. Melbourne won 78-63 on the Crows. Highest goal scorer was Bailey Fritsch with the 3 goals. Looking at the game itself, the Demons started the quarter quite well, but in the last 15 minutes or so, Adelaide really took the dominance back on their side, but going inside 50, they were terrible. There was no cohesion with their midfielders going inside to their forwards, and they only actually hit one inside 50 target late in the quarter, which was marked by Fogarty, and then he ended up kicking a goal. But in the second term, really intense start to the game, to the quarter. Thought both teams were doing really well to not give an inch on either side. And early in the quarter, Melbourne had some chances to get back a bit of a lead, but they couldn't convert on the scoreboard. I do remember at one stage they were 2 goals straight, and they were 2 goals 5 midway through the quarter. Late in the quarter, though, Melbourne were able to break away and took a 17-point lead into half-time. But then in the third quarter, Melbourne really started to dominate. The stronger bodies in the midfield, I really thought, stood up. And the Crows really couldn't compete with that, I thought. A lot of their midfielders had pretty poor performances for the Crows, in my opinion. And one thing that Melbourne did in the third quarter, what they didn't do in the second, was they took their chance. They took a 5-goal lead in the 3-quarter time. But the Crows did fight their way back in the final quarter, but they squandered so many chances. They kicked 2 goals 6 in the end, and it was a really poor for the Crows. They did that against Fremantle last week when they had some chances earlier in the game, and now they've done it this week. And now they're 0-4, the Crows. They go against Carlton next week. So, in Melbourne as well, that's going to be a really tough start for Adelaide. And right now, if Taylor Walker's not firing, which he's not, they don't have anyone to go to. Burgess has probably been one of their better competing tall forwards, and he got subbed out in the game. Fogarty has been next to nowhere. Rankin's been playing through the midfield and been okay, but not doing much up forward. Rochelli's been pretty poor so far. And the midfielders of the Crows, they're all a one-string lineup. Dawson, Laird, Berry, who came on as the sub, Crouch. There's not many runners through there. Now, we'll talk about one player in the midfield later with the votes that I thought was actually pretty good for the Crows, but they're too one-dimensional at the moment in the midfield, Adelaide. Looking at the statistics, though, top scorer on the AFL fantasy front was Jordan Dawson with the 112, Petrarca 112 as well, Max Gawn with the 109, Matt Crouch with the 106, Brodie Smith with the 105, and Rory Laird with the 103. And now we'll get to the Boundary Riders votes, and as I say every single week, guys, we will be giving 3, 2, 1 votes for every single game in the AFL season, and then in the bye between the finals and the end of the season, we will be doing a live stream of a light countdown of the Boundary Riders votes. And of course, at the end of that, we will be getting our second ever Boundary Riders medalists. Of course, the most prestigious award in the AFL world, bigger than the Brownlow, of course. And last year, Zach Butters was the inaugural winner, so we'll see if he can back it up again. But to the votes for the Adelaide v Melbourne game, 3 votes went to Christian Petrarca, 2 votes to Max Gawn, and the 1 vote went to Jake Saligo. He didn't obviously get the Dream Team points, but I thought he was one of the cleanest players in the midfield for Adelaide. I thought he was very good for them. He does give them something a little bit different. He's not exactly the same as like Dawson and that. He's got a little bit of speed. He's got a little bit of difference. So I think he will be playing a lot more through the midfield. So a really good performance from him. And that's why he got the 1 vote. Me and my brother were, discussing who should get it. Maybe Bailey Fritsch with the 1 vote. But we thought that Jake Saligo was good throughout the whole game. Dawson and Laird, who were both... Laird had a pretty good first half, but kind of petered off as the second half. And Dawson had a really good last quarter, but he kind of was pretty stagnant throughout the rest of the game. After that, we moved to Brisbane versus North Melbourne. Down at Norwood Oval, the Parade. Big game for Brisbane. They needed to win this one, and they did exactly what they had to do. They flogged North Melbourne by 70 points in the end. Brisbane won 112-42, and highest scorer in the end was Joe Danaher with 5 goals, 4. Could have had a 9-goal performance, but did what he had to do. Only one injury concern from this game, unfortunately, Zach Bailey. He hobbled off late in the game in the dying minutes and appeared to have an ankle injury, so hopefully it was maybe just an rolled ankle. There hasn't been too many reports about this, so hopefully he's okay for next week for Brisbane. But that's a big injury for Brisbane. He's a very important player. But let's be honest, let's get to the game. Brisbane did what they had to do. They led from start to finish. They led by 5 goals at quarter time. The dominance continued throughout the whole entire match. Not really a surprise there. Lachie Neale had a massive first quarter. He had 14 touches. He was brilliant, set the standard. And I think that's just where it went from there. Look, there's not a lot to talk about in this game. North Melbourne in the second half did fight back a little bit, only conceding the 5 goals. But let's be honest, Brisbane put the cue in the rack. They were done with the game. They were more than happy to just hold out. I do want to make one quick shout out. He doesn't get into the votes, but Charlie Comben He's missed a lot of footy over the past year or two. He got back to these. I think it's his first game back in quite a long time. And what a game he had. He's now, and they're putting him in the key back. I think he was drafted as like a ruck forward, but they've been training him as a key back. And he had a pretty good performance for North, despite, losing by plus 10 goals. As a defender himself, he played quite well. He had 22 touches, 12 intercept possessions, 6 intercept marks and 8 spoils. So congratulations to him. He had played a really good game for North Melbourne. To get to the stats though, Joe Danaher top scorer with the 135, McGluggich with the 126, Sheasel with the 121, Dunkley with the 114, Zorko with the 111, and Charlie Comben with the 107. So, by the way, I just looked as well. His price right now, Charlie Comben, is only 338 AFL fantasy front. So definitely a good wait to have a look and see maybe if you pick him up. I think I've got about 5 North Melbourne fantasy players right now, so I don't really need him. But I may think about it if he can score it out well. So now to the Boundary Riders votes. 3 votes, of course, went to Joe Danaher. 2 votes to Hugh McCluggage. And the 1 vote to Dane Zorko. Really liking the game that he's playing. I thought that he'd probably play up forward this year. But he's playing a half-back role for the Lions. And he's been one of their best players so far this year. Let's get to Friday night. Port Adelaide versus Essendon. And after a big week for Essendon, a lot of talk about them. Big win, comeback against St Kilda. They don't think boarded the flight to Adelaide. They played really poor, especially from the second quarter onwards. And Port Adelaide ran out winners by 69 points. Port Adelaide 111 to Essendon 42. A couple of injury concerns from this game. Travis Boak got injured back and he was subbed off at halftime. And then Archie Perkins as well came off in the last quarter and he's done a hamstring injury. So a couple of soft tissue injuries for Essendon throughout the season. Maybe they're back on it. I don't know. I'm just joking. But yeah, very disappointing. Archie Perkins looked like he was in for a big year and that's a pretty big injury concern for the Bombers. Look back to the game itself. Great start to the game. Straight goal kicking. Both teams, I think, kicked 4 to 3 goals early in the game. It was a really good start to it. Port Adelaide took the lead into quarter time, but honestly, I think Essendon should have taken the lead into it. Port Adelaide made some silly turnovers, and Essendon just couldn't capitalise on the late chances. In the second term, quite a tight start to it, but then 3 late goals to Port Adelaide in the second term really broke the margin, and Port Adelaide took a 35-point lead into the main break. Before we move into the second half, what an all-time quarter from Connor Rozee. In the second term, 7 touches and 2 goals from a midfielder was massive, and Connor reminded me of last gather round with Zach Butters. It was kind of the catalyst to his season, his push for the Boundary Riders medal, of course, and he had a massive game, Connor Rozee. Moving on to the second half, Essendon looked lethargic in the third term, looked like they wanted to board the plane again and just get back to Melbourne. Port Adelaide took full advantage, dominated through the middle, looks way stronger than the Essendon midfielders, and they were stronger over the ball as well. And the Essendon edge looked pretty fucking dismal in this game. I don't think they brought it. I think they just left it back at the headquarters because they played terrible in that third term. And in the last quarter, it was basically the same old, same old. Brad Scott has said it's a wake-up call, but I'm going to be honest with you, Essendon have not looked good so far this season. They showed a half against Sydney. They showed a half against St Kilda, just hanging in there. They just hanged in against the Hawthorn and then just won the game, basically because they kicked straight. And Port Adelaide, a game that they, were expected to really compete in, they didn't even show up. And I was really disappointed because I thought this was going to be a really big game. And Essendon didn't show much at all, especially after quarter time. It was a pretty dismal performance from them. Let's get to the statistics though. Zach Merritt, top score with the 135. Connor Rozee with the 133. Nick Martin with the 114. Jason Horne-Francis with the 111. Butters with the 106. Caldwell with the 103. And then Jeremy Finlayson with the 100, rounding out the AFL fantasy scores there. And the votes, of course. 3 votes went to Connor Rozee, like I said, was best on ground by far. 2 votes went to Jason Horne-Francis. And the 1 vote went to Jeremy Finlayson.
Alright guys, let's get to our next game now. We'll talk about the Saturday afternoon game between the Swans and the Eagles. And despite the Eagles coming out with a pretty big performance against the Swans, they did come out winners Sydney in the end, a 104-78. There were 2 injury concerns from the West Coast Eagles side. Edwards, who was subbed out in the second quarter, really unfortunate for him. And Marek as well was actually in a heavy clash in the third quarter and never returned to the field. So a couple of injury concerns for the Eagles. But to the game itself, Sydney actually started okay in the first quarter, but just didn't take their chances. And on the Eagles side, they actually did really well, kicked a couple of goals and were only down by 11 points at quarter time. I was at this game, of course, being a gather round. In the second quarter, look, West Coast played some good footy in the second term, but I actually think on the other side, Sydney, that was one of the worst quarters I've seen from them as a Swans supporter in a very long time. They wanted to play some bruise-free footy. It was unprofessional from them, and look, they didn't look like they wanted to be there. I don't know if other people noticed this, but when Sydney kicked some goals in the first half, they didn't celebrate at all. Like, it kind of looked like they were already in front by 50 points, and they kind of just thought they were going to win the game. As a Sydney supporter travelling to Mount Barker to go see the game, it was really disappointing. I really wanted to see Sydney, play some good football, and in the first half, they didn't bring anything, and West Coast took the lead into half-time. Now, look, in the second half, Sydney did respond. They weren't 100%, but they did well to respond and kicked a couple of goals, took a couple of goal lead into the three-quarter time. But to be fair, the Eagles did well. Credit to them. They played some decent footy at times, and they kept with the Swans. They didn't just let them blow it back out to like a 50, 60-point margin, which probably people were expecting going into the game. And in the last quarter, they showed, in the end, the Swans just showed more polish and class when West Coast just didn't have that. They had chances going forward, the Eagles, but they just... A couple of disposals went to, handballs went to the toes of players and just out of their reach. And the Swans had a little bit more skill, a little bit more polish, like I said, and were able to get the ball forward and, convert their chances, which in the end was the reason why the Swans ran out by 26-point winners in the end. So going on to the AFL fantasy front, the statistics, of course, Errol Goulden top scored with the 133, Liam Duggan with the 125, Elliot Yeo with the 108, along with Isaac Heaney, 106 to Chad Warner, and 96 to Jeremy McGovern. And now to the votes, of course. Errol Goulden finished with the 3 votes, Elliot Yeo with the 2 votes, and Chad Warner with the 1. So next, let's move up to the Fremantle v Carlton game at Adelaide Oval, the Saturday afternoon game, and what a game it was. Talking about the game itself, Freo were in front for a lot of the last quarter, but Carlton came back really late, kicked a couple of late controversial goals, and won the game by 10 points. Carlton went out winners 73 to Fremantle 63. Highest scorer in the NLO scoring contest was Charlie Curnow with the 3 goals too. There was one injury concern to come out of the game, which was Frederick, with Michael Frederick suffering a right hamstring strain, grabbing at his leg and strode off the ground very gingerly, and probably missed about 3 or 4 weeks with that. So it's really unfortunate because he does give a lot of forward pressure for them. But to the game itself, it was a tight, low-scoring contest from the outset, really. I think everyone can kind of see that with the scoreline, let alone watching it. As soon as the team tried to really pull away, the other team would pull them back. I do want to quickly mention the first quarter of Jacob Weitering as well. Massive first quarter for a defender. Had 9 disposals, 5 marks, and 2 tackles. Absolutely massive for a key defensive back. And he was massive throughout the whole game. He did a lot of times when Fremantle looked like they were going to break away, he would take an intercept mark. He would take a big moment. So, really good game from him in the end. It was a really tight contest in the third quarter as well, going into the second half. Freo were able to kick 2 goals late in the quarter, though, and actually got themselves in front going into three-quarter time. And then, of course, what a massive last quarter was sitting in the crowd about 50-metre line down the Riverbank stand end, and it was just a massive last quarter. Fans from everywhere were screaming. Midway through the final quarter, there was 2 quick goals to Freo, and I kind of felt at that point that Freo were going to be able to hold on. But then a frantic finish coming in the end with a comeback from the Blues. 3 goals in the space of about a minute and a half. Of course, we will all talk about the 2 goals. I do talk more about it in the podcast this week, which will be coming out Wednesday. But the 2 controversial goals, it just sucked the atmosphere out of the contest. And 2 very controversial goals, but in the end, Carlton were the ones who took out winners by 10 points. Now, moving to the statistics itself, Andy Brayshaw led the top scorers in the AFL fantasy front with the 148. Jacob Weitering with the 118. Brody Kemp with the 112. Hayden Young with the 110. Aish with the 108. And then Jeremy Sharp, very good performance from him with the 106. And then to the votes, of course. So the votes. 3 votes in the end went to Jacob Weitering. 2 votes went to Charlie Curnow. And the 1 vote went to Andrew Brayshaw. After that, we moved to Saturday night. Also at Adelaide Oval was the Bulldogs up against the Cats. And despite the Cats leading for most of the contest, they almost got it stolen from them than the Bulldogs, but were able to hold on by 4 points. The Cats won 95 to the Bulldogs with 91. So no injury concerns on this game, but to the talking points of it, wasn't quite a slow first quarter, probably even second quarter. It was an absolute snooze fest of a game if you were there. So many of the crowd were just bored shitless for the majority of the first half. But I do have to quickly mention the first quarter of Brian Myers, because he had a massive first quarter. 50 AFL fantasy points and 11 disposals as well. So it looks like he's going to get a lot more disposals this year. Really good performance from him in the first quarter. Kind of tapered off towards the end, but really good start from him. The Dogs took an early lead in the second term, but the Cats kicked 3 of the next 4 goals, and could have been a lot more as well if Jeremy Cameron kicked straight. He kicked 1 goal 3 in the second term to bring his total at the first half to 1 goal 4. Like if he kicked straight, Jeremy, you could have had a 6-goal first half. Sorry, 5-goal first half. But anyway, a game really opened up in the second half. It was a massively high-scoring third quarter. The Bulldogs got 5 goals and the Cats got 6. So 11-goal third term was really big for both sides. And then we get to the last quarter. It was a very interesting sort of quarter. And the Cats kicked the first goal of it. And it seemed like they had it really done. It looked like it was all over. But the Dogs came back hard. They led by Bontempelli. Absolute massive performance. If you guys haven't seen him live, it's just so insane to watch him play. He is such a good performer live, and just his movement is something to behold. You need to go watch the Bulldogs game live just for his sort of game. But massive performance for him to bring him back into it. But the story of the Dogs night was the amount of chances that they left out there and the ease that the Cats had when they're going forward. They always look dangerous going up forward, especially when they got into the hands of Jeremy Cameron. And it was very much the case in the end. The Dogs trying to win the game, but the Cats just being able to save it. And we kind of seen this year that most teams who try to save the game lose it. The Cats did enough to hold on, but I think if that game for a couple more minutes, things may have changed. Moving to the AFL fantasy front, Marcus Bontempelli top scored with the 149, of course. Liberatore with the 132, Adam Treloar with the 125, Jeremy Cameron with the 116, Jack Bowes with the 97, and then Ryan Myers with the 96. And then we get to the votes. If Jeremy Cameron doesn't get in here, if he kicked 3 goals, I probably would have given him a vote. But to kick 2 goal 4, I'm sorry, you're the key forward of the team. You should be kicking straight. 3 votes in the end went to Marcus Bontempelli. 2 votes went to Tyson Stengel with the 4 goals, and then Adam Treloar got the 1 vote. After that, we get to Sunday early game, which was the Gold Coast Suns up against the Giants, the Expansion Cup, of course. And the Gold Coast Suns had a pretty good performance, but in the end, the Giants ran away with it, 117 to 89. Top scorer in the end was Toby Green with the 5 goals, 1 massive performance from him. But let's get to the game itself. The GWS looked really strong in the first quarter and took a lot of their chances with a 5-goal first term. Really good from them. 5 goals straight, in fact. And GWS really started well in the second term with an early goal, but the Suns went on a 3-goal run, but then took the lead. But then at halftime, the Giants were able to take it back. But a shout out to the first half of the debutant in Clousey. 11 disposals, 91% efficiency, and 1 goal. Massive off the wing. I think he'll be in for the rest of the season off that wing. He played brilliantly. High scoring third quarter with the Giants getting 5 goals and the Gold Coast getting 4. And the Giants were able to hold on to a tight 8-point lead in the 3-quarter time. And I have to mention the third quarter of Mac Andrew. What a massive game he had. So many people around us at the ground were just saying how good a player he was how he was performing. He had 12 touches, 5 of them were marks, and 83% disposal efficiency. He's in for a massive year. I know my brother mentioned it earlier in the year when we were talking about breakout players, and he was massive. But in the end, the Giants were able to break away in the final quarter. Suns had a little bit of hope when Anderson kicked truly early, but the class of the Giants just shunned through in the end, and they're able to run away with a 29-point win. So good win for them, for the Giants, and stay undefeated going into round 5. So looking at the statistics on the AFL fantasy front, Stephen Coniglio top score with the 115, Noah Anderson with the 110, Lockie Whitfield with the 106, Sam Flanders with the 102, debutant in Clousey with the 95, and then Jared Witts with the 92. And then to the votes in this game, 3 votes in the end went to the 5 goals of Toby Green, 2 votes went to Mac Andrew, had to give it to him, he was a massive for the Gold Coast, saved a lot of goals for him, and the 1 vote went to Stephen Coniglio in the end. Alright, let's move to the Sunday afternoon game, guys, between the Tigers and the Saints. And despite the Tigers kicking the first 4 goals of this game and St Kilda not kicking a goal until late in the second term, the St Kilda are able to come back in the third and win by 7 points, 67 to the Tigers, 60. So the Tigers, like I said, had a really good start. High pressure really made it difficult for St Kilda to move the footy from defensive 50 to forward 50. And they capitalised going forward as well with a 20-point lead going into quarter time and keeping St Kilda goalless. Sluggish old game of footy in the second term, I've got to be honest. There was only 1 point scored halfway through the quarter, and it was a sluggish game of footy, I'm going to be honest with you. But St Kilda finally got their first goal with a few minutes to go before half-time, but the Tigers still took the lead into it. Then the Saints are absolutely on fire in the third term. Look, a completely different side. They're able to kick 3 goals, 3 in the first 10 minutes of the quarter, and continued to dominate the third term. Despite missing some chances, they still kicked 6 goals, 6 in the third term, and took the lead into the final quarter. And then, even though it was a really tight last term, both teams wouldn't really want to give an inch. Tigers fought really hard, but in the end, the Saints were able to hold on. Did well to finish strong and won by 7 points in the end. So St Kilda, a couple of big wins for them. So now looking at the statistics on the AFL fantasy front, Rowan Marshall top scored with a 135. Toby Nankervis 132, massive from the both ruckmen. Jack Steele with a 131. Then we have Wanganeen Miller with a 127. Shea Bolton with a 124. And then Dustin Martin with a 115. So now we move to the votes for this game. 3 votes went to Shea Bolton. Massive performance with him with the 4 goals and 19 touches. Rowan Marshall with the 2 votes. Did really well on the Saints. I think he was their best player. And then Dustin Martin gets the 1 vote in this one. I think he had a massive first half. A little bit tapered off, but I feel like he deserved the 1 vote. But I do think St Kilda as a team were better. But in the end, I think there were a couple of individual efforts from Richmond that deserved the vote in this one. And now we get to the final game. Probably game of the round. Even maybe game of the season so far. Massive game between Collingwood and Hawthorn. The pretty old rivals as it goes into it. And obviously was marketed as the Jack Ginnivan game. And in the end, Collingwood were able to scrape home by the skin of their teeth after a really poor first half from Hawthorn. and were able to fight back, but just fell short. Collingwood won 77 to Hawthorn 72. Now, highest goal scorer in this game was the unlikely hero, almost victor, was Blake Hardwick with the 4-goal one second half performance. What a performance from him in the second half. Almost got his team over the line in the end. But let's talk about the game itself. So the Pies started off really well. First 2 goals of the game, Lachie Schultz looked brilliant, and Hawthorn looked like they didn't have a plan going forward through most of the first quarter. And the Pies, every single time they went forward, they looked like they had something to do, a plan going forward, and they took an 18-point lead into quarter time. Into the second term, the Hawks actually kicked the first 2 goals of the second term, but then the Pies regained control, kicked 5 goals in a row, and took a 38-point lead into the main break. Now, the Hawks in the third term, they did really well, looked a lot more dangerous going forward, and were able to kick 4 goals to 2 on Collingwood's side, but Collingwood still had a 25-point lead going into the 3-quarter time break. But like I said, I have to mention Blake Hardwick here. A massive 3-goal one third term gave them a slight bit of hope. Me sitting there with my brother in the forward pocket down on the hillside, we thought, look, Hawthorn not going to have much of a chance here. We thought Collingwood would kind of re-strengthen the control and then take this one from them. But the Hawks came back like a house on fire. No one saw this coming. I think all the Collingwood fans sitting there were not expecting this to happen. But what Hawthorn did in this last quarter was massive. They kicked four goals in the last quarter, led by Blake Hardwick and Jack Ginnivan up forward. Massive performances from both of them. And Collingwood were lucky that a couple of their defenders, like Billy Frampton and Darcy Moore, had some big moments in the last few minutes, because Hawthorn were absolutely charging towards this win. And I think if Hawthorn had a little bit more composure in the last few minutes, I think they would have stolen this game. But there were a couple of moments late from their younger players that they just didn't take the moment, which, kind of hurt them in the end. And that's kind of the reason why Collingwood were able to hold on by 5 points. I do want to quickly mention, though, before we get to the statistics, I do wear a badge of pride because I was making a couple of jokes on the Collingwood side against the Collingwood players. I'm sorry, I made jokes. It wasn't that bad, okay? It was just having a couple of cracks at Nick Dacos, okay? Who is human, who doesn't care what I say. But I was able to piss off a Collingwood supporter, so I was pretty happy about that. Anyway, I've mentioned that a few times to people and they've had a good laugh because they're not Collingwood supporters. But anyway, I don't think the players care, bro, so don't worry about it. Anyway, let's move to the statistics of this game. Top scorer on the AFL fantasy front was Jordan De Goey, the 135. Massive game from him. Top Mitchell with the 113. Josh Dacos with the 110. Darcy Cameron with the 109. Carl Amon with the 107. And then John Newcomb with the 98 rounds out the top 6 there. And now we get to the votes for the final game of Gather Round. 3 votes in the end went to Jordan De Goey. Massive performance from him. 2 votes went to Blake Hardwick. I thought he was massive. I think he deserved it. And the 1 vote in the end went to Tom Mitchell. So guys, that's basically all we have for the review of Gather Round being round 4. We'll be doing a full more of a review about the round itself, about the atmosphere and that sort of stuff in the podcast. So if you do want to listen to that, that will be out on Wednesday. And I am sorry to the people who usually see this come out the day after or the morning after the round ended, but obviously when I got home last night, after the last game, I was pretty stuffed and I couldn't get this video out. And today I had to drive my partner up to see her family about 2.5 hours away, so I wasn't able to do it this morning. So I've done it on a Monday night, so this will be out Tuesday morning for you. But if you did enjoy it, make sure to leave it a like and subscribe over on YouTube. Thank you so much for 500 subs, and we really do appreciate it. And also, if you are listening on Spotify, we are releasing these reviews on Spotify. Make sure to leave us 5 stars, and also make sure to follow over there as well so you're notified on future episodes of the review and the Banner Rounders podcast. But thank you for listening and watching, guys, and we'll catch you all next week.